Okay, thank you very much. First of all, for this invitation, especially because these three words, effectiveness, equity, and education, are at the center of my heart and my work. They were keywords in my PhD, and I carry on exploring the connections between those three. So today I'm presenting about the evaluation and accountability for school improvement, global and national approaches. And at a glance, first I will be describing some global scene, so accountability regimes in places in high quality education systems. Then local scene, I will be talking about the impact of England school inspection, and then I will conclude with some recommendations. So the first thing to consider is that school improvement systems can be divided into those emphasizing more external evaluations, those that are more centered on school self-evaluation, or both. And not all top-performing countries have external evaluation or inspection. For example, Japan and Singapore have much stronger school self-evaluation systems, where the external evaluation or inspection is part of that process, but the center will be in how the school evaluates themselves. But the presentation of today, it is about how that external evaluation, that external judgment is developed in each different system. So Perryman et al., what they did is that they asked these 6 key questions about inspection to really understand the variation between countries, and also to point at things that are really important to consider. The first one is when an inspection is done. So some countries have cyclical inspections, meaning every 2.5 years or every 5 years a school will be inspected. But what is much more common is this differentiated or risk-based inspections. So when we think that a school will be facing some difficulties, or it's described as low performing because of something is going on, then we are more frequently inspecting those schools. Or thematic, for example, we will look at the system level, thinking about something really specific. For example, how we are doing on well-being. And also you can have inspections for a specific to gain, for example, an educational license, or a complaint, for example, from parents can bring a red light, and it will activate the systems to get an inspection. The second key question is who inspects schools. So what we see across is that most of these teams include experienced teachers, and this is super important because, as we just heard, it's about trust. If teachers trust the person that is providing that inspection, and they validate them, they will be much more open to act on that feedback. But also some teams have these qualified non-teachers, social sciences, experts, and also people coming from other sectors. That's also part of this process. The third key question is what is inspected? So schools tend to have these meeting legal requirements, but also the provision of learning, support and guidance, learning outcomes, leadership and management, and also some of these countries have this threshold for failure. So this links with this idea of risk-based. So this is also really important because it means that some inspections are more specific, where others are much more wider in terms of their remit. As you can see in these countries, in the columns, we don't have here Portugal, but the idea is that these questions can help us think about the inspection system that is in place here and what can we learn from others as well. The fourth key question is what evidence is gathered. So most of countries that perform high in PISA and in other international assessments, they review the school documentation, so they do some work before going to school. Also, they review school data, They interview teachers, head teachers, sometimes students, and in some countries, such as in England, lesson observations are very, very important. But some other countries, they don't really go into lessons observations because they don't think it's really the evidence that they can gather in a small, so they are really, they really prefer to produce less stress in the system and not observe, for example, lessons. A key other point is reporting. So is the school given an overall grade, as in the case of England? So do we say this is the outcome of an inspection in terms of a grade? Or the school is graded on individual standards? Or it's more about strengths and limitations of schools are identified in this inspection visit? And also the public schools' specific reports. And I think here the most important thing about reporting as well is some systems do public reporting. So you can access these reports through the media and are available everywhere. And in some other systems, these reports are only provided to the school to act upon, as is the case in some inspection areas in Germany. And the other key question is the role of the inspectorate post-inspection. So what happens after inspection? In some places, they advise on sanctions. In some places, they impose sanctions, or they are mostly centered on providing support or taking on progress of that, taking on progress of what happens after the inspection. So it's not only what happens during the visit, but most importantly, what happens after that visit with that feedback at the country level. So I think those 6 questions are really important and also allow us to really understand the diversity, because there's no one way of conducting school inspections. And now I want to really focus on a national perspective, so thinking about England inspection system. So we have Ofsted, which is the Office for Standards in Education, Children's Services and Skills, and this is the largest inspectorate of schools in Europe, and it was established more than 3 decades ago in 1992, but school inspections have a long history before that. And they have systematically been conducting inspections of providers of education, training and care. And while the inspectorate is considered exemplary in many parts of the world, inspiring accountability regimes from the Middle East to Latin America, many countries have taken a very similar approach to Ofsted, to their own system. At home, it has come under increased scrutiny given its unintended consequences. So what we did with Professor Melanie Aaron is that we conducted a systematic review of the literature to really understand what is already known in terms of the impact of Ofsted. And what we included, it was academic peer-reviewed articles indexed, published during the last 3 decades, from 92 to 2002, empirical studies, primary data obtained from qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method studies, and comparative studies, including England. So there are some studies that are comparing 2 or 3 European countries in general, so we also included those. But we also exclude papers published in other languages than English, those that use Ofsted inspection reports as primary data, policy documents published or commissioned by the inspectorate, policy reconstructions, theoretical papers, news articles, research reports that were not peer-reviewed or not published in academic journals. So we really use this peer review as an indication of quality. Academic papers focusing on the impact of Ofsted inspection in other sectors, because Ofsted has a very wide remit. It also inspects the health system, the security, training centers, social care. We were only focusing on schools. previous reviews of the literature and academic papers focusing on the impact of offset inspection in other stages in education, such as early years, further education, or higher education. So what we had, we identified more than 500 papers. We screened them. We applied this inclusion-exclusion criteria, and we focused on 33 papers, and we found 3 themes that were most important to classify and to synthesize all this evidence. The first one is the impact of offset inspections on student academic outcomes. And we found mainly these 4 papers that were published in England from 2003 to 2015. 2 of them identified positive effects of inspection on pupils' GCSE scores after 2 years of being placed under special measures, and positive effects of inspection on government's mathematics performance thresholds level 4 on the 11 kids stage 2 test scores in the year of and after inspection. So we have 2 papers that found positive effects on academic outcomes, and 2 that found the opposite, unintended consequences in terms of reduction of pupil CCS scores in different years and groups of schools. So in terms of the academic outcomes, we have this mixed picture. We also found other 2 themes. The second one was teaching practices and behaviors. So we found 19 studies reporting this. Most of these reported unintended consequences, and a minority, 5 of them, reported a mixed picture of positive outcomes and unintended consequences. The third key theme was school culture. So from the 10 studies reporting this, the great majority, 9, described unintended consequences, particularly in students and staff well-being, and only one study reported positive outcomes. And here it's very important to mention a caveat or a limitation of these studies. And it is that most of the more critical, the teaching practices and behavior and the school culture are mainly based on case studies, small samples, not longitudinal data. So we need to see this as exploratory more than, this is not causal in any way. But this is the information that we have. This is the research that has been published before. So, in terms of the main conclusions and recommendations, the first one is that we see a high degree of variation across inspection regimes, ranging from those conducted with limited consequences, or what in the literature is usually known as soft accountability, to those that are more intrusive and high stakes, as is the case in England. Second, there's no clear association between the type of school inspection system and school performance as measured by student achievement in the national test, but also in the PISA test that we have been seeing. So caution should be taken before recommending one inspection system from one country to be implemented in another one. Something really interesting that we have been discussing here yesterday as well was the importance of tests. So that's another, when here we are talking about at the school level, but systems also vary in terms of the existence of tests for students that are high stakes, for example. And that's another level of accountability that plays into this mixed. So it is also, the third point is that it is necessary to explore how inspection systems are implemented at the system and school levels to ensure that each system uses the evidence gathered to drive improvement. And this is something that you can really get by visiting schools and when there is an inspection coming on, or when they tell you about the experience that they had about an inspection. And Ofsted, in particular, appears to have this mixed impact on school improvement. And the main consequences, the main conclusion is that the highest the stakes of school inspections, the more potential for this impact, but also the more potential for unintended consequences. So if an inspection is very low stakes and nobody really look at the report, it's very difficult to have any impact really on the school improvement. But we always need to consider this other side of the coin, that what we know is that these inspection systems also carry these unintended consequences that we need to be paying attention to. Thank you so much.